because we come from communities where the truth doesn't always reach the headlines, but it lives in what we face every day. This is Changing Trends and Times, bringing clarity and context to the issues shaping our lives right now. No spin, no distractions, just real talk rooted in real impact. Now, are you ready to lean in and bring your voices into the conversation? Then, allow me to introduce to you a man committed to asking the questions that matter and breaking it down so we all understand. Your host, Charles King.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, before we get started, let me give you guys some updates as to what is transpiring. First of all, I want to tell you guys that today's episode is the first part of a four-part series. This episode is titled Left, Right, and Black, the Political Parties and the Fight for Representation. Next week's episode will be Reconstruction Unfinished, and the third week is going to be Coded Language, the Southern Strategy. And the final part of this series will be Leverage, Black Political Power in the 21st Century. Also, for you guys, what I want you to know is that with this series, my team and I have done an enormous amount of research. So there will be resources that we will be putting up so you guys can download these. The first here for this episode is a political history series, which we have done some extensive research that we're actually going to make sure that you guys get copies of these. You have to download them. Also, we have done a case study. This is a research case study that we're going to be posting, and you guys will have the opportunity to go and download these as well. Hopefully, I'll be finished, and we'll be finished with all the updates that we're doing to the website so we can put them on the website. But if we don't put them on the website, we'll most likely post them in a place where you guys can just go have access to them, and you'll be able to download them. And you'll be able to download them at no cost. But the whole series, that is from this episode all the way through to episode 4, there will be documents that will be posted, and you guys will be able to download these resources for free. And again, you don't have to take my word for the information that's being put out, but you will have this information so you too can be informed. And also, the last thing before we get into the show, we're going to be debuting our newsletters. And this one is for American Black and White. And like I say, hopefully if the website is not complete, then wherever I get the opportunity to post these where you guys can actually get this newsletter, you will be able to. For CK Stories from the Heart, this newsletter is also going to be available on Monday as well. And this one, for Changing Trends and Times, it too will be published on Monday, June 1st. So I want to thank you guys for that in advance. And let's get into the show. In 1872, a man stood in the United States House of Representatives. He was Black, he was elected, he was powerful. His name was Joseph H. Rainey of South Carolina, the first Black man to ever preside over the U.S. House of Representatives. And he said something that echoes across centuries. So as we cut forward 150 years, it's 2024, a Black voter in Georgia shows up to their polling location and is told their registration has been purged. A Black voter in Wisconsin is turned away because of a strict photo ID law. A Black voter in Arizona drives 40 minutes to their polling site only to find it closed. Same country, same constitution, same fight. Welcome to Changing Trends and Times. I'm Charles King, and today we are telling the full story from Reconstruction to right now of Black America's relationship with political power, political parties, and the never-ending fight for representation. This isn't a story about Republicans versus Democrats. This is a story about promises versus reality, about what happens when a people's votes are needed, but their lives are not protected, about power, who has it, who takes it, who loses it, and who is still fighting to take it back. And again, I want you guys to remember, this isn't a story about Republicans versus Democrats. This is a story about promises versus reality. So, as we get into this, to understand where we are, we have to go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of America, though that story matters too, but the beginning of Black Americans' formal relationship with political parties. The year is 1865. The Civil War has just ended. 4 million enslaved people have been declared free, and a question hangs over the entire nation. What does freedom actually mean? The Republican Party, less than a decade old at that time, was the party of abolition. It was the party that had backed Lincoln. It was the party that pushed through the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. And in the years immediately following the war, it was the party that genuinely, if imperfectly, attempted to build a new America. Now, some of you find that, I know you're going to find that hard to believe, but yeah, the Republican Party wanted to do this. What do you say, really? Yeah, this is something, right? So, so this period, roughly through 1865 to 1877, is called Reconstruction. And if you've never studied it in depth, I need you to understand something. Reconstruction was radical, not radical in the pejorative way the word gets used today, radical in the original sense, root level, transformative, unprecedented. Black men formerly enslaved, legally denied personhood, were elected to Congress. They were elected to Congress. State legislators, city councils, and school boards across the South. In South Carolina alone, a Black majority legislator rewrote the state constitution and established the state's first free public school system. In Mississippi, 2 Black senators served, Hiram Revels and Blanche K. Bruce. This was not just symbolic representation. This was governing. This was power. So I want you guys to think about this because, as you think about when we talk about both South Carolina as well as when we talk about Mississippi, at one point, if you look at the actual original map of America, Mississippi actually was considered the largest state in the Union. It was just that big. So, what caused Mississippi to actually draw down and to mirror the state to the left, to the right of it, which would be Alabama, is the Civil War that took place inside the state, where the people to the east wanted their freedom from the people from the west. And so when that happened inside the state, we had the actual president of the United States to go down and to declare to break the state in half, where they look just alike when you look at the map. You look at Alabama and Mississippi, they look just alike. They're identical. The state was split in half. But originally, all of that was Mississippi. All of that. So Mississippi had representation, more representation actually than you could ever imagine. Now, what South Carolina did, South Carolina was able to have that first Black congressperson that was actually the majority leader in the Congress. But of course, you don't hear much about that But you see, at this time now, things are like flowing, things are changing, and supposedly we're working towards a real diplomacy here in America during the Industrial Revolution period. Now, as we get here and what we think about, the whole premise of this show is to talk about how now we've got the entire South that's trying to do this redistricting, to have no Black representation, and to be totally represented as white in Washington, D.C. Now, as you let that sink in, you guys should think about this. Why would we not actually stand up for our rights and do the right thing and making sure that we have the representation that we deserve? This is more than just earned. We're free people. This is supposed to be a democracy, and supposedly, according to those same Republicans in the Republican Party, racism does not exist. But yet and still, each and every last one of those states have not only banned books, they're trying to cut out representation for Black people. They're also now trying to find a way, after all the repression and all the things that's been done by this administration, they are now saying the final nail in the coffin that they need now is to strip voting rights from anything that's not white. Now, ain't that something? And we're talking about people that sit there, they look in your face and they tell you, oh, I'm not racist or I'm not prejudiced or whatever have you, but look what they're voting for. I have a question here that's on the screen, and it says, are you sure? And the answer is, yes, I am. Yes, I am. This is the purpose of the show. Reconstruction was radical, not radical in the pejorative way the word gets used today, but radical in the original sense, root level, transformative, and unprecedented. I want you guys to remember that, because when we talk about unprecedented and we're talking about being radical, radical was the thing to do then, because once you had people that sided with you and you were going to make that change, they went and they tried to make the change. But here is where the story takes its first great turn. Here's where the promise begins to curdle. By the mid-1870s, white supremacists, paramilitary groups, the Ku Klux Klan, the White League, the Red Shirts were conducting a systemic campaign of terror against Black voters and Black office holders across the South. Murders, beatings, arson, voter intimidation on a scale that makes modern voter suppression looks almost genteel. The Republican-controlled federal government pushed back at first. The enforcement acts, federal prosecutions, military deployments, but then something shifted inside the Republican Party itself. Northern Republicans increasingly focused on industrial capitalism and westward expansion began to lose interest in the messy, expensive, political, costly project of protecting Black lives in the South. Now we let that sink in. We're talking about now, you're going from protecting the citizens to saying, oh, it's okay. You can do what you got to do. And so what actually transpired now is that now we're starting to get this turn to where now the Republican Party that was doing its thing about freedom and its radical change have changed everything. They're now moving into a whole new direction. And so now the party is not actually everybody in the party is not on the same page, because there's still an enormous amount of people that were not about what's happening when it comes to this. So 1877, the Compromise of 1877, Republicans Rutherford B. Hayes wins disputed presidential election in exchange for withdrawing federal troops from the South. Reconstruction ends, Jim Crow begins. The Compromise of 1877 is one of the most consequential backroom deals in American history. Republicans got the White House. White Southern Democrats got the South, meaning they got to handle their Negro problem however they wish, without federal interference. And Black Americans who had voted Republican faithfully, who had put their bodies on the line, who had built institutions and held office and voted. Black Americans got nothing. They got left behind. Within a decade, nearly every Black man who had served in Southern legislators had been driven out. Poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, violence, the full appearance of disenfranchisement was constructed brick by brick, with the implicit permission of a federal government that had decided Black voters or Black votes no longer served its interests. The party of Lincoln had made its choice, and Black Americans would not forget it, even if history books largely did. So now, we're at the point now where things are changing, where the repression is not only about where the pressure is now intensifying. We're now getting to the part of, where the Southern whites could control Black people as any way that they saw fit. They could kill them, they could hang them, they could try to enslave them again. They could do whatever they wanted to do, because the North didn't want anything to do with that. Now, this is where the question has to come in. How many of you believe that when it comes down to it, that people that are doing what they have to do, means that these folk could kill people? And we think about back then in 1870, and what do we have right now here in the 21st century? It's because we still have that same situation that's recurring now. And what that is that you got folk that are doing some of the most heinous things in the world. They just don't want no accountability. They do not want accountability. Now, ask yourself, why is that? Why is that? Now, there's a couple of questions here. I'm not sure what these questions are supposed to be. Now, do you like those who are gay and the transgender? I have no issues with folk as to their gender identity whatsoever. I support all underserved and marginalized communities, and I'm not sure why you're asking me that question. I'll just tell you this: I like all people, and I think that in doing this show, it appears that I think there's probably some people that might not like the idea of what this truth is telling. This truth is telling what is happening, what has happened, and what is going to happen. And so we're telling this story, this series, like we would do any other week. This series is big. which is why it's going to span for 4 weeks. But I can tell you this as well. All of the postings that I mentioned earlier, I want to make sure that you guys get those, because I want you to make sure that you're actually looking, reading, and understanding what you're seeing today. Because what you're seeing today are these exact same things right here. And this is something that has to be remedied. So let's transition to another part of this great story. Between 1910 and 1970, that's a 60-year period, approximately 6 million Black Americans left the South. This was the Great Migration. This is when Black people left to go to the Midwest as far as they possibly could, to get factory jobs, to be able to support their families, but also be out of the South. That was repression and was pretty much, these people were bad. They were bad. We saw the beginning of redlining. We saw all these things take place. We saw even folk that were in the military weren't treated properly. And so, as we talk about when they left in search of a life that wasn't governed by the constant threat of racial terror, is why they left the South. This movement, the Great Migration, is one of the most significant demographic shifts in American history. And it didn't just change where Black Americans live, it changed American politics permanently. And so what that means is that by the Blacks that actually went to these different states throughout the Midwest, maybe Northwest, maybe Northeast, however you want to classify it. When they went to these places, not only for safety, but they went there because they wanted to be able to provide. So by getting there, they're able to be comfortable. They don't have to live on a hair trigger, and they're not actually expecting somebody to just come up and just start shooting and killing people. They weren't expecting that kind of stuff to happen. So the Great Migration was 6 million Black Americans relocated from the South to the northern and western cities between 1910 and 1970. Cities most impacted: Chicago, Detroit, New York, Philadelphia, Los Angeles. This is where people went. They went to be out of the culture of what was happening in the South that was still stuck in time. But what you also see is the very South that we're talking about right now that did this is the same South that right now you have all these states that are now talking about they want to do redistricting because they want total white representation, no Black representation whatsoever. And they say that's not racial. They say that is not racial. You've got to be kidding me. Now, for those of you that's got some comments about this or maybe some questions, please put them in the chat, because I definitely want to hear what you have to say as we go through this, because this in itself is the whole thing about what it is that Black people need to do when it comes to political affiliations, when we talk about these parties. Because in the northern cities, Black voters had something they never fully had in the South: the ability to actually vote. And in close municipal elections, their votes mattered. Democratic machines in Chicago, New York, Detroit began courting Black voters, not out of altruism, but out of arithmetic. Black voters could swing elections, and politicians who could do math mentioned they mentioned that the things that they wanted and what they were trying to do, that they had these opportunities to make a difference. and making a difference and being free was all people wanted. That's all they wanted. But the South was still stuck on wanting to have free labor, not pay people, and think that they could be in control of people's lives regardless of the case. Now, we're not going to talk about how we got there to that point, but this is what they're still thinking. This is what was in that mentality, and this is what's happening today. And this is why we have to get together and we have to make a difference, and we have to be able to change this. We have to fight back when it comes to this. Don't care how many protests, don't care how many petitions you got to write. You've got to do something to let your voice be heard, because to say that you want to have a white majority South is crazy. And then I'll get back to why that is as well as we get later into the show. Because in 1932, most black voters who could vote still voted Republican. Herbert Hoover had carried roughly 65% of the black vote in 1932. But then came the Depression, then came Franklin D. Roosevelt. However, the New Deal wasn't designed for Black Americans. It wasn't designed for Black Americans. Let me be very clear about that. Many New Deal programs, the Agricultural Adjustments Act, Social Security in its original form, the Civilian Conservation Corps, were administered in explicitly discriminatory ways or structured to exclude the very occupations, domestic work, farm labor, that the majority of Black workers held, and yet the New Deal put food on the tables and money in pockets during the worst economic catastrophe in the country had ever seen. For Black Americans who had nothing, some federal assistance, even unequal assistance, was more than the Republican Party was offering. By 1936, Franklin Roosevelt carried roughly 71% of the Black vote. So the shift had begun, not because Black Americans trusted Democrats, but because survival demanded a pragmatic calculus. So now Black people starting to think. The Republican Party has turned its back on them, and they needed to shift. And they're thinking that they're going to shift to the Republican Party. I'm saying to the Democratic Party. So if they're going to shift to the Democratic Party, then apparently they're thinking that there is something that is going to be in this for them, but also it's going to give them that relief and that freedom that they need, where they are not being terrorized constantly, daily, hourly, every minute, every second. Their existence apparently was a problem for white people. Yeah. So it appears that there was a problem. What that problem is, we all know what that is. That is, wanting to get that free labor, wanting to have people controlled, and wanting to make sure that Black representation would never be what it had begun to be as of 1870. So the Black vote for Democrat in the presidential elections, 1932, it was 27%. 1936, it was 71%. 1940, it was 67%. And 1948, it was 77%. So what this is showing you the shift that Black people are having, because they're voting their interests. They're voting what's going to be best for them. And that's the thing that we need to have right now. We need to have that right now, because that unity, everybody was on the same page, and they realized that going down that lane that they had been forced into. And the Republican Party was one that was going to get them killed. So no, that was not going to happen. So then came Harry Truman, a Missouri man with a complicated personal history on race, but a presidency that marked a turning point. In 1948, Truman desegregated the U.S. military by executive order. His administration issued, to secure these rights, a landmark Civil Rights Commission report that called out American racial inequality by name and demanded federal action. The reaction inside the Democratic Party was explosive. Strom Thurmond of South Carolina led a walkout of Southern Democrats, the Dixiecrats, and ran for president as states' rights tickets, explicitly opposing civil rights. He carried 4 Deep South states. The Democratic coalition was fracturing. The question was, which direction would it fracture? And turns out what happened is Black people left the Republican Party. They started voting Democrat. And there were the Dixiecrats that were in the Democratic Party that hated Black folks. And so what actually happened is these parties wound up switching. They wound up switching. Republicans became Democrats. Democrats became Republicans. That's what we have today. And this is when this happened, and when this switch took place, it took place in the most inconspicuous way, because the Southern Dixiecrats, okay, we're talking about states like South Carolina, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, Virginia, okay, Texas. They're all stating that Black people had no rights. Black people had no rights. So basically, what I'm displaying to you, what I'm trying to exemplify to you, is that the Black vote more than counts, because it's the Black vote that has always made the difference. We've always tried to do our civic duties until we got people today that feel like the vote does not count. Therefore, not exercising that civic right is most likely going to be very harmful. But so what we got to let also be known is that today, here in the 21st century, people have made their choices. You got a few Black people that support the Republican Party. You have an enormous amount of Black people that support Democrats, but you have an even larger number that are independent and that vote for who they want to vote for. They have that control. And see, this is where we need to come on board, especially as Black people, is we need to come up with one strategy to how we're going to do a party. If we're going to support a party, or if we're going to create our own party. Because you see, Republicans and Democrats don't mean Black people any good. Any good. And the politicians that are representing those parties aren't doing anything to support the Black initiative or Black people in general for what is needed the most in our communities, in our resources. Get some return on those tax dollars that we have. Get support on those tax dollars that we have. And you see, we need to get our return because we're being taxed. I want you to think about something as we go through this, because this is very strong. This is very true. But it's also one of those things that we have to realize, that when the truth matters and the truth is what it is, we have to accept the truth, and we have to do what we have to do with the truth, not with the lie. I want you to think about this. You live in a diverse community. You live in a Black community. Think about this. You have an emergency, you dial 911, they don't show up for 20, 30 minutes or an hour, and the person is either dead or they're maimed for life. But that's acceptable to those that represent us today. That's accepted. And so you can't have something like that being accepted. What you've got to do is you've got to decide if you're going to support one of these political parties. These parties, I will tell you this, they don't do you any good. And I want to remind you, I need you guys to make sure that you are downloading these resources, because these resources are very, very important. They're very important because they're going to give you the insight to make that decision. Do you want to support the Republican Party? Do you want to support the Democratic Party? Or do you want to stand independent and form a coalition to form the Black Party? Because I think that that's probably where we probably should be going. Because if we got to put faith in these folk that are actually calling themselves representatives of Black people that's in DC, they don't represent Black people. They support and they write bills for each and every part of an ethnicity other than Black people. So as we go further on into this, we're going to talk about the march in Selma, the march on Birmingham with the fire hoses, the sit-ins at the lunch counters, the march in Washington in 1963, LBJ signing the Civil Rights Act in 1964, Barry Goldwater's campaign, Nixon's 1968 campaign rallies, Southern white crowds reacting to civil rights news. They hated that. They hated that. The 1960s are where the modern political map was drawn in blood, in legislation, in political calculation, and in strategic betrayal. Strategic betrayal. On July 2nd, 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law. It banned racial segregation in public places. It prohibited employment discrimination. It was the most significant civil rights legislation since Reconstruction, and LBJ knew exactly what it cost him politically. He reportedly told an aide that night, "We have lost the South for a generation." He underestimated they lost it for more than that. You see, what that tells you is that in the South has always believed that white people are the best thing in the world. They're the best thing since sliced bread, and that they know best. We all know that that's not true. We all know that is not true. But what we do know is that, for all of us that want to continuously to do our civic duties, and we want to do the things that's going to make us better, we got to make sure that we are actually really thinking about how we do our civic duties when it comes to politics. We've really got to delve deep and understand each and every last one of these people that are a candidate. I will honestly tell you that for most of us in our communities, what we should be thinking about doing is that, yes, we want to vote, but what we should be thinking about in our states, find out what the write-in policies are to do a write-in vote for your candidate. Write them in. When you do a write-in campaign, it's just as legal as those that are on the ballot. And so when they do that, who knows? You could actually put in a congressman or a senator and not even worry about how they're trying to keep you from voting, because you are voting with your party and what you think is best for you. Nobody can tell you how to vote. Nobody can tell you that they're going to sit there and they're going to watch you vote, because that's unconstitutional. But there's a lot of things that's unconstitutional in America, and it still happens. Such as like the person that was there in the chat talking about gay and transgenders and the LGBTQ community. he is exactly right. You know, not all of us are against the LGBTQ community. This platform, just like all the platforms that's a part of this this ecosystem, supports the LGBTQ community, supports the rights of everyone, supports everyone's rights. But this is where, you know, a lot of institutions are going to have to stand up and do that exact same thing, because it's not about just a few. It's the majority. It's the enormous amount of folk that's got the impact that should be on board to making sure that everybody is doing what's definitely need to be done for their civic duties and in their daily lives. So Barry Goldwater, the Republican nominee in 1964, voted against the Civil Rights Act. He argued it was a matter of states' rights and individual liberty. Whatever his stated philosophy, the political effect was undeniable. Goldwater won 5 Deep South states that had never voted Republican since Reconstruction. White Southern voters were sending a message, and Republican strategists were listening. This is where we have to talk about something that is contested by some historians, defended by others, and uncomfortable for everyone, the Southern strategy. So now, you know, not saying that everybody, but, you know, this puts everyone on notice. When you're Black and you're sitting there and you're talking to a lot of white people, it makes you wonder, is this one of these people that are voting for people in this administration? Are they voting for these Republicans that are about repression, about repressing people and oppressing people, and not thinking that civil rights for everyone is okay? It makes you wonder. And so are you trusting to that? Because trusting a lot of things today, if you're non-white, puts you out there on the line. And again, as I said, I'm not saying that all white people are like this. I'm just speaking in generalities that you have to be careful and you have to tread lightly, because there are even people that look like me that I would tread lightly on, because if you cannot support the rights of everyone and think that you know, things should be evenly squared across the board, we have a problem. We have a problem. Because they're billionaires don't mean billionaires get a pass. You don't get a pass for just killing people. You don't get a pass for exploiting people. Because if I was to do that, then I would be held accountable. But they're not held accountable. And yet and still, you know, you're voting for these people. These people are interfering in elections. They're interfering in people's lives. They're doing all these things. They're doing all these things. And so let me just give you guys a little bit of a brief synopsis of the Southern strategy. A Republican Party elected approach that was developed in the 60s and 70s, designed to attract white Southern voters by using coded racial appeals. Law and order, states' rights, welfare. In the wake of Civil Rights Act, most prominently associated with Richard Nixon's 1968 presidential campaign. So this is coded language that was stuck on the Black community, when anybody that's got sense know that when they talk about law and order, and we all know who commit the most crimes in the world, and the people that are stealing and doing all these other things, but you throw it off by just finding a reason to arrest somebody Black, beat them half to death, and say this is what they did. And there was no justice for that. When they talk about states' rights, you know, Southern states still don't believe that they have to comply with a lot of federal regulations. And when they talk about welfare, we all know, again, this is another lie. This stigma is stuck on the Black community, when the Black community, there are people that get assistance, but they are not nearly the number of any other ethnicity in this country, as a matter of fact. That number's in single digits. The top folk that are getting the welfare are the white people. Those are your welfare recipients. But you know what they always say? You know, to get it off of you and to make it stick on somebody else is to scream it out and to just continuously scream it, and people start to believe it. And that's what's happened here in America, especially in the South, for all these times. So Nixon's 1968 campaign is the clearest articulation of this strategy. Running on law and order and appealing to what he called the silent majority, Nixon spoke in language that white voters heard one way and black voters heard another. The phrase law and order had a long history as a coded attack on black civil rights protests. States' rights had been the rallying cry of every segregationist politician since Reconstruction. Nixon won, and the political realignment was complete. By 1972, he carried 49 states. 49. And that same strategy is still used to this day. And it's used today to put a stranglehold on what everybody does and what all black people are trying to do, and what they have accomplished up to this time is that these people are actually trying to form law to take things away from black people again. And we still have people that are supporting these parties. We can't support these parties. We can't. At least I know I can't. I can't do it. I won't do it. I vote for who I want to vote for, and you're not going to tell me who I need to vote for. If I go to the polls and I'm voting, I may write myself in. I may write myself in. And I can do that. You can do that too. You don't have to give those people your vote. Just vote. Vote. Just vote. Meanwhile, black Americans have found their political home, not because Democrats were champions of justice, but because the alternative had made its priorities crystal clear. From 68 forward, black Americans could vote Democratic at rates between 80 and 95% in every presidential election, not out of blind loyalty, but out of clear-eyed assessment of which party was actively working against them. So, Republicans are working against you. Democrats are working with you, even though they're not completely with you, because you're not quite loyal to them, because there are a lot of things that need to be changed, like they still need to be changed, but they too are refusing to change things the way that they should be. Because there are candidates that black people that's of the Democratic Party want to be candidates, but of course the chair and the leader of the party refuse to do that. Now, I want to give you guys an example. This was a few years ago. There was a judge that stepped down from her judgeship in North Carolina, was running against a Republican that she clearly could have won that race. She had to fund all of her campaign. She lost by 2 points. The Democratic Party did not support her at all. They said that they had other seats that they felt were much more winnable than hers, and they lost them all. Their strategy, too, is not about supporting black people. Their strategy is not about supporting black people. But you still got people that still believe that one day something's just going to fall out the sky and Democrats just going to do whatever they need to do. I doubt that very seriously, because those of you that look at mainstream media, and when you look at folk that are there that's representing the Democratic Party, you may see somebody black or Hispanic out of every 15 people that go on all those little networks. You may see 2 to 3 black or Hispanic or Hawaiian folk that are there representing Democrats. You see, it's all about appearance. It's keeping up appearances. That's where they are. They're not about helping the people, because everything that's dark on one side, you can rest assured it's dark on the other as well. It's dark. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, signed by LBJ just a year after the Civil Rights Act, was the most powerful voting rights legislation in American history. It sent federal observers into Southern polling places. It required jurisdiction with the histories of discrimination to get federal preclearance before changing any voting law. And it worked because black voter registration in the South surged from below 30% in some states to over 60% within a decade. The question was never whether black Americans would vote. The question was always who was going to make it as hard as possible and who had the power to stop them. So you see, Democrats still, they're not doing what you need them to do. But I will tell you this, what they think they're doing is really not working, and it's not sitting well with a lot of people. And it's not sitting well, and if you want to ask me, it looks like to me, like there's just an intention on just losing all these seats that are there for them to win, because they don't want to face the music of knowing what they need to do if they get the black vote. That's what it looks like to me. And if it's looking like that to me, it should look like that to you, because think about it and keep looking as we're going getting ready for these midterm elections. And I want you to look at what the Democratic Party is doing. It is nothing positive when it comes to black people. And those news shows should be your sure indicator, because they're not pushing anything that's going to be public or positive when it comes to black people voting. So let's transition to the 1980s. Hip hop adjacent production feel is underscore, bass heavy, restrained, evolving through the act towards something more complex and layered as we move towards 2008. Reagan campaign footage and news clips, anti-drug campaign imagery, just say no, PSAs, footage of overcrowded prisons, news coverage of Jesse Jackson in 84 and 88, campaigns, Clinton in the 92 campaign, archival of the 94 crime bill debates, and Obama 2008 campaign footage, crowds. Yes, we can. Obama's inauguration, January 2009. Now, this was a moment where people that voted Democratic, was overwhelming in that choice. And that choice was, if you were black, you're going to get up there, you're going to make sure you vote for Barack Obama, because you want Barack Obama to be president. You want to see something that looked like yourself in the White House that's going to do something real. That's what we were looking for. But we got a lot of good things from him, but he too was saying what he could not do when it came to just helping black people, but he did it to help white people. He did. There were a lot of things that he did that were beneficial, but they were beneficial in generalities. They weren't specific like they were for white people. So I just I want to make sure that you guys understand one thing again, as I spoke in the beginning of the show, is that we're going to be posting some research documents that we did. We're going to post a political history series document, as well as a a case study that we did research and did a study on. We're going to post those. Hopefully, if I need you guys to just stay tuned on my social media. So if you're following, I need you to make sure that you're following, because if the website is not ready to take on this and other documents that I need to put there, then I'm probably going to post them to one of the social media places where you guys are going to be able to go in and download them. So Ronald Reagan took office in 81. And whatever his supporters say about his economic legacy, his impact on Black America was and remains devastating in ways that are still playing out today. Communities, sentencing disparities between crack cocaine, more prevalent in Black communities, and powder cocaine, more prevalent in white communities, were enshrined in law at a ratio of 100 to 1. 100 grams of powder cocaine triggered the same sentence as 1 of the gram crack the math of incarceration followed. The U.S. prison population growth. In 1980, we had over 500,000 incarcerated. 2008, 2.3 million incarcerated. Black Americans, 13% of the U.S. population, was 38% of the prison population. That's of the Bureau of Justice statistics. So we're at that point. And, you know, there's a lot that's going to go on with this. I will tell you what I will do is there's more to this episode. I wasn't able to cover everything, but I want you guys to make sure that you get those documents, and I'm going to find a way to pick this up where I left off, and maybe just do a posting and just get it out, because I want to make sure that you guys you guys get the conclusion to this, because I need to make sure that you guys are understanding. Don't just vote for a party because the party says it's this and not that, or it's this and this. No. Vote your interests. If it's about you, then you vote it. If it's for you, vote it. If it's positive and it's about you, vote it. If it's not, leave it alone. Leave it alone. Because right now, today, we have a whole lot going on. There's a whole lot at stake. But I want you guys to know that we're here for you. We are here for you. And if we are here for you, then that's all that matters. So, in closing, I want to say this to you. Any of you guys that, that once you get these documents and once you get the opportunity to read them, I'm giving you the opportunity to, you can reach out and you can ask me any questions that you have, or if you want to just chat about these resources that we put on the website, we can chat about those, because, this is really serious, and I want to make sure that each and every individual that's a follower of Changing Trends and Times has got his or her understanding together as best as possible, and are able to make the decision that is necessary as to if you want to support one of these two political parties. I want to thank you guys for your time, and I want you guys to come back. Make sure you're here next week, because next week we're going to do the second show in this series that's called Reconstruction Unfinished. So I will talk with you guys then. You guys have a great day, and please come back and see us next Saturday, Changing Trends and Times, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm your host, Charles King. You guys have a great evening. Thank you.